Welcome to the Movement Logic Podcast with yoga teacher and strength coach Laurel and physical therapist Dr. Sarah Court. With over 30 years combined experience in the yoga, movement, and physical therapy worlds, we believe in strong opinions loosely held, which means we're not hyping outdated movement concepts. Instead, we're here with up-to-date and cutting-edge tools, evidence, and ideas to help you as a mover and a teacher.
Welcome to episode 10 of the Movement Logic Podcast. I'm Laurel, and I'm here with my co-host, Dr. Sarah Court. Today, we're talking about breathing. How should we breathe? Is there a correct way to breathe? Are there incorrect ways to breathe? As people who help people learn movement, should we also be helping people learn to breathe too? Here is a bit of what we'll cover. Is there a right and wrong way to breathe? Or is there a right or wrong way to breathe depending on the context? I'm thinking of the question of whether to breathe through the nose versus the mouth. And a lot of times what I understand is that it's better to breathe through the nose. And then belly breathing versus chest breathing, which, a lot of times I hear that it's preferable that we breathe and have our belly move and not our chest, or we should have our belly moving or it's wrong, because we tend to hear that, there's a way that's better than the other. We'll be getting into, whether or not that is true or what our opinions are on that. What happens to our breathing when people tell us how to breathe? So is it helpful to be told how to breathe? Are breathing techniques helpful? Is it helpful to be instructed on some supposed optimal way to breathe? And is having someone else influence our nervous system and maybe in some cases override what would be the natural functioning of it, is that helpful? Can it be helpful? If you then make changes as the breather, breathing differently to your breathing, do those changes last beyond the interaction with the teacher, the coach, who's ever, changing your breathing or helping you change your breathing? Are these more long-term changes or are they just short-term changes? So Sarah and I are coming at this from different perspectives. Sarah's a physical therapist. I'm a strength coach and yoga teacher. And so also we haven't really had this conversation before. We've not discussed this at any length ever. So we're coming at this a little bit from our own perspectives, off the cuff, and we're going to come to our own understandings together here for you live, or not live. You're listening to this after the fact. It's not a live recording. In the moment, in this podcast now, today, May 17th, our dialogue is not scripted, in other words, and we're just kind of thinking out loud and bouncing ideas off of each other and sharing what we've learned. I have mixed feelings personally about telling people how to breathe, even though I've done it for a while as a yoga teacher in various ways, things like marking the breath with vinyasa flow type sequences of inhale, step your foot forward, exhale, warrior two. Of course, I was taught in my 200-hour training that there is a particular, for example, in the sun salutation, moments in the sun salutation where you should be inhaling, moments when you should be exhaling, and specific rules around that. I've also spent some time talking about breathing and sort of, I would say, guiding interoceptive awareness of breathing. So interoception is the ability to pay attention to and notice the details of our inwardly felt experience. I've potentially also facilitated what I have called improved breath mechanics by mobilizing the structures of breath using therapy balls, yoga postures, things like that. But I do still have mixed feelings about telling people how to breathe, mostly because I've experienced it from the student end being really unhelpful in some cases, and then also helpful in other cases. So I guess my first question for you, Sarah, as a physical therapist, and you also have a background teaching yoga movement. Do you fiddle with your patients' breathing mechanics in the clinic? Is this something that you work on with them?
I do, and that is the technical term, is fiddling.
Fiddle.
Yes. patient comes in, and I'll be like, well, today we're going to fiddle with your breathing mechanics. I do, but it's a case by case basis. And it tends to be, it's not something that I'm automatically drawing every single patient's attention to, especially not in the beginning. But in particular, if I haven't already seen something where it suggests to me that they need some attention to it. The ones that get this sort of immediate, and I would call it really just the observation of their breathing before I fiddle with it at all, are people who tend to come in with any sort of, basically anything from the rib cage up, dysfunction. So people who come in with neck pain, people who come in with shoulder pain, people who come in with like headaches, jaw clenching, all of that kind of stuff. 100% in the eval, the first time that I see them, I'm going to be clocking how they're breathing.
And how do you do that? Can I ask, how do you clock how they breathe?
I just watch them do. I have them do, well, it depends on what we're doing, but if I have them going to do some sort of exercise or something, and typically I do it with them lying down because that's the easiest way for me to see how they are breathing. I may give them something to do, and then sort of my second set of eyes. Apparently I have 4 eyes. One set of eyes is watching them do the thing that I asked them to do. And then the second set of eyes, which, God, that would be helpful to have 4 sets of 4 eyes. I'm also looking at how they're breathing. And if I notice something like the only movement is kind of in their upper chest, or if I notice that it is a fact that people who work a lot in front of computers tend to hold their breath, because what you tend to do when you're on the computer for a long time, and I've seen myself do it, and I've seen other people do it, is you kind of breathe extremely shallowly, and then you take one big breath, like every half hour or something like that, which is not ideal. I mean, but anyway, so I watch sort of the mechanics of how they're breathing, and then I might intervene in some way if I think that it is going to, make an improvement in how their body is feeling what they've come in for.
What are some of the ways that you work with people on their breathing?
That's a great question. It has evolved. It has evolved based on sort of what you're talking about. When I was initially a movement and yoga teacher, I did a lot of like, okay, put your hands on your belly and feel your belly expand when you breathe in and all that kind of stuff. What I have seen in the clinic and with clients out of the clinic is I don't think that calling it belly breathing and emphasizing the belly actually teaches improved use of the diaphragm. Because one of the things that it's like you don't realize things sometimes until you see people do it. But one of the things.
Can you mention what the diaphragm is?
Yes. So one of the things that I see people do when they do quote unquote belly breathing is they use their core muscles to poof their belly out, which is more just like that feeling, like that the idea of like bracing outwards and pushing your belly muscles out to make your belly quote unquote expand, right? Like if you think about like where your belly button is and just try to push that outwards right now, like.
But that would be like would that be a diaphragmatic contraction though?
No, because you don't even have to. I can push my belly out, and while I'm talking to you right now, I'm pushing my belly out. I'm not breathing in.
And you're breathing in and out.
Yeah.
But my breath, I'm doing it too, but my breath is very shallow. So I'm wondering, have I locked my.
Yeah, you can't do it and use your diaphragm correctly is the sort of short answer, right?
Right, okay.
I see a lot of people do that because what they're responding to is this idea that their belly has to go out. So instead, I just do, however much education I have to do around what the diaphragm is. So your diaphragm is your abdominal diaphragm is your main respiratory muscle, and at rest, it is domed. It sits like a jellyfish kind of shape up underneath your ribs. And when you inhale, it flattens down, and the effect of it flattening down expands your entire trunk circumferentially, which is one of my favorite long, fancy words, means
Oh, yeah.
everything all the way around, your entire circumference. So, and then when you exhale, it domes back up again. And that's the basics of what your diaphragm does. So generally, instead of saying, okay, we're going to bring the breath into your belly or something like that, I have the person start to put their own hands on their ribs, where the diaphragm is, or I put my hands on their ribs and I tell them, I want you to move my hands out when you inhale.
You put them
So
on the side of their ribs?
Yeah, on the side, in the front, a lot of time on the side. And then I have them do it. And then we expand into like, okay, touch different parts of your ribs, your upper chest, feel the back of your ribs into the table, feel that expand. I'll put them in child's pose and I'll have them reverse it so that they feel, because then the front of your rib cage doesn't move as much and the back moves a lot more. So just getting the person to understand how to use, it's like anything, right? It's like training any muscle. How do I use this muscle effectively? And a lot of people don't know unless they were a singer or, had a yoga practice or something, they don't really know much about their diaphragm and breathing. And a lot of people breathe in a very shallow way, just kind of into their upper chest. And the thing is, like, nobody's not breathing, right? My friend,
That is a true statement.
That's I'm going to put it on a t-shirt. Nobody's not breathing. So the idea of like a right and a wrong breath to me is a little too black and white. And it's more sort of like, well, if I am going to fiddle with someone's breathing, why am I fiddling? And what is the goal, right? Trina, our friend Trina, her husband Farzad, who is a medical doctor, what did he say to me one time? He said that his big quote was always, all bleeding stops eventually. And so for our purposes, we could say all breathing stops eventually, but literally nobody's not breathing. They're not walking into your yoga class they've held their breath their entire life until now. Right. So it's a question of, having a real goal behind whatever you're choosing to do, rather than everyone gets this blanket, cue of what you're trying to make happen.
Right.
And it's not, sorry, just one last thing. It's not always, some people kind of can understand and get the ribs to move and all that kind of stuff. But I think there is, certainly for some of the patients that I see, sometimes there's a psychological component around breathing, and, what's that song, Waiting to Exhale, right? There's something around for a lot of people, their physical experience as a reflection of their experience of their life. And for some people, breathing more deeply, quote unquote, is actually a dangerous thing psychologically, right? Because nothing is safe in their world. And if you breathe in deeply, you might relax, and relaxing is not safe because for whatever reason, right?
So by that, I guess, logic, which I completely identify with and feel that is true for me, is it in helping someone use their ribs more, or to move breath via the ribs more? Are we maybe primarily working to create some type of safe environment for that person first and foremost? Because if the safety isn't there, what are we teaching? What are we reinforcing within their nervous system?
And establishing yourself as a safe person to this person, and there's obviously levels of this. I mean, I had a client that I worked with a long time ago who had been a victim of a sexual assault, and I had been working with her previous to it, and then afterwards, when we were working together, the what we did completely changed, and there were entire sessions where we just laid down on the floor next to each other and breathed for an hour, and that was it, because that was what needed to be that's the word I'm looking for. For her to get her autonomy over her body back. That's where it was going to start.
Right.
But, that's obviously an extreme case. And that's not something that you necessarily are even knowing about if you're teaching a group class. Right.
But you can assume that a large percentage of your students have had sexual trauma.
Sure.
Especially when you're working with majority female populations.
Yeah. I
think that it's like, oh gosh, is it 1 in 5 or 1 in?
It's something like that.
It's like 1 in 4 or 1 in 5 women have experienced sexual trauma. sexual assault.
Yeah.
And other types of trauma as well. So this idea of manipulating the mechanics of breathing via some type of external intervention, whether that be instruction, hands-on, teaching someone how to use a prop differently, versus facilitating an environment of safety. I think these are very different, but very much related.
Yeah.
And I think that when I think back on all of the bad experiences I've had with learning to breathe differently on various levels, the environment was not safe.
Yeah. You probably didn't. The times when I
it wasn't safe for me.
For sure. And that's, it is such an individual thing. And I think as well, I've also had experiences that didn't feel good. And I think it does also go back to like, oh, well, for whatever reason, I didn't like, or I didn't trust the person trying to teach this thing to me. Therefore, I didn't trust what they were trying to make me do.
Yeah. So you do work with patients on breathing, especially if you see that type of intervention being a potential piece of the solution puzzle to whatever problem they're coming to you with.
Yeah. And sorry, one other thing I wanted to say, because this is specific to what I do as a PT, but it's not irrelevant to the work that we all do as movement teachers.
Yeah.
That more and more I'm coming to my own sense in terms of what I see happening for people when they have pain or dysfunction in the way that their body is working, that it's really like everything about it is really controlled by your brain and your nervous system. So the part of the puzzle of helping someone not have so much neck pain is helping to downregulate their nervous system so that they're not in such a heightened state. And then I'm like, okay, and now do these like resistance exercises with their neck, but there's so much, just held tension in their body that's actually going to have very little positive effect unless we get them into a nervous system status where their body, and really their nervous system is willing to take on some sort of like stress to the system via movement.
Yeah. I definitely feel like in my experience as being a student of breathing in various different workshops or whatever classes, that the more relaxed I was able to become in the class, the more the focus on breathing felt beneficial to me in the moment. The more interested I was and curious I became, and the more I felt like the act of breathing in a particular way sort of reinforced the relaxed feeling that I was experiencing. However, I do know that there are many people who, for which conscious relaxation practices actually create more anxiety.
Yeah.
And that they really would benefit from externalizing their focus rather than internalizing it. And as soon as we ask people to start breathing in a specific way, we are asking them to internalize their focus.
And to interrupt a process that is going on naturally in the background.
Right. And so if we're asking people to pay attention to their breathing, we're asking them to internalize their focus. And that inherently is not beneficial to all people.
Right.
Many practitioners of movement with their various backgrounds benefit more from externalizing their focus. And so maybe to externalize your focus on breath, I guess could be possible, but what would we then focus on? I mean, this is just a question I'm coming up with in the moment, but like we could think about tempo and sound of breath, because those are potentially not tempo necessarily, although if it's to music, right? Or to a metronome, that's an external informant. It's a way to kind of externalize your breath, I guess. And then also the sound of breathing might be, something that, we breathe out, we hear it through our sense of hearing, and then we take in that information as like an external thing. I'm just thinking out loud here, but paying attention to, say, like whether the ribs or belly are moving, or paying attention to the feeling of air entering through the nostrils and things like that. These are all really internal experiences that I do think can actually be anxiety producing for some populations of people.
I was going to say, one of the things that I actually think is really good about when people are practicing asana and timing their breath to the movement, then the movement becomes that external cue, because the cue is not breathe as deeply as you can in this way. It's inhale and step your foot forward. So now I've got to do two tasks at the same time.
Right.
And that takes a lot of attention. That takes all of my attention in that moment, right? So it's a very, I think, for me at least, it's a good way to kind of force myself into a more present state, because I have so many things to do at the same time. I'm not able to be thinking about something else. And that's less about trying to control the mechanics of the breathing and more just, do this thing and breathe in while you're doing it. Now do this thing and breathe out while you're doing it. And there are mechanical advantages to that as well, not just in yoga, but certainly in strength training.
Oh, for sure.
So.
Yeah, I was you're mentioning like being drawn into the present moment by having to focus on manipulating multiple, functions of your body at the same time, that being, helpful to you. I think that this reminds me of the fact that there are different levels of experience in every modality. And like we're sometimes working with people who are brand new to yoga or brand new to strength training. And then we're sometimes working with people who've been at it for many, many years and maybe teach it. And these two different populations, if we could call them that, would benefit from different levels of instruction, different detailing of instruction. And so my approach has often been with beginners to strength training, as well as, beginner yoga students. Although I don't encounter as many beginner yoga students anymore, is that we can just keep breathing, right? Just breathe. Exactly. Just keep breathing. Don't hold your breath and just keep breathing. And then as we get more familiar, we get past the initial learning, kind of like the cognitive overload of learning the movement. And we get into more of that associative stage of like, okay, this is not demanding 110% of my energy to even be able to follow the movement cues, to physically put my body into whatever position I'm being asked to put it in or lift the weight. Now let's actually dig a little bit deeper and go a layer toward a little bit more nuance and think about how we're breathing. And so for strength training, it's exhaling at the sticking point. Maybe in very heavy lifts, holding the breath, although I have not had a need to teach students how to hold the breath, although students will often ask, like, should I be holding my breath? And they're doing a fairly heavy lift. And my answer is like, so for example, my pull-up program, it's like, yeah, you may find yourself naturally holding your breath, and that's not wrong. It's your body's strategy, which you will potentially improve upon that strategy and might find yourself holding your breath less or more, depending, but it's your body's strategy to create stability, intra-abdominal pressure, like pressure within the abdomen, intra-abdominal pressure, by basically creating more rigidity, right? So
what does exhale at the sticking point mean?
So exhale at the sticking point, thank you, is for in traditional strength training, we're moving a weight typically toward and away from the floor, or we're moving a weight through a ray of movement. And within each degree of that ray, we're having to overcome more or less resistance, depending on what our muscles' mechanical advantage is relative to the resistive force. Okay, so this is where like the physics of it come into play. But you'll notice that, say, when you do a bicep curl, which is always the example given, it's like, I don't know why, it's like the poster child of strength training, but it's like,
I think everyone can like point at their arm and be like, I understand that there's a muscle right there.
Mimic the bicep. They know what the bicep is, right? Yeah. If you're doing a bicep curl, your bicep muscles, your elbow flexor muscles have the most amount of mechanical advantage at 90 degrees of elbow flexion, and they have less when your elbow is straight. So getting the bicep curl started is harder from the muscular standpoint. And so then when you're at 90 degrees of elbow flexion, it's a little bit, your muscles are more advantaged to be able to work. However, then at that 90 degrees of elbow flexion, the resistive force is also, if you think of the resistance as the opponent to the muscles, it's also, your opponent is also incredibly advantaged. In other words, the resistance is highest at that 90 degrees. So it's really a good thing that at that range of motion of 90 degrees of flexion, your muscles are able to work the hardest, because that's when the resistive force is the greatest, right? I mean, it's fairly easy, energetically speaking, to just hold a suitcase by your side, which is the beginning of a bicep curl, right? Or to hold a bag of groceries. But then you would never carry a bag of groceries at 90 degrees of elbow flexion, right? Because you have to work really hard to hold something like that. For the reason of the resistive force having quite a bit of leverage over you. So when you're doing a bicep curl, you might exhale through that 90 degrees of flexion, because that's when the going is getting tough, and that's when the tough need to get going.
And that's the sticking point?
Which is an advertisement for Ford trucks.
And also an old movie called Romancing the Stone that you may be too young for, but there was
I'm not.
Ocean, and I believe it was called When the Going Gets Tough, and then parentheses, the tough get going.
Yeah, and so then this curve of relative mechanical advantage changes for every exercise. So the deadlift, right, begins from the floor, and we have to flex our hips to about 90 degrees and lengthen our hamstrings and lengthen our glutes. And from that place of increased muscle length, we actually have a lower mechanical advantage at those two muscle groups. Then we're having to overcome the inertia of the weight and the resistance, the weight, the mass times gravity of the thing we're lifting. And so that's the sticking point. That's the hardest point, because we're most disadvantaged and the resistance is the hardest to overcome.
Yeah.
Meanwhile, when we're standing all the way up, right, and just holding on to the weight, we could probably hold that position, for much longer than hovering the weight above the floor in that flexed hip position. So the sticking point is where we want to exhale when the going gets tough toward the end of the set, especially, right? That becomes more important. But in the beginning, when I'm working with beginning weightlifters, it's like, let's actually first focus on pressing the floor down with the feet. Let's work on tempo, moving at a particular tempo. Let's work on creating a line of pull and creating a body position that facilitates that efficient line of pull. And then questions start to naturally arise, or I start to notice, like, hey, it might be helpful if you use your breath in this way after they've learned the exercise, right? And after they've built a level of strength, and their nervous system has gotten used to this type of stress that's being placed on it. In yoga, the breath now is less of a marking of the breath in terms of the flow aspect of it. And I do teach a little bit of flow, and it's more about using the breath as really an invitation to pay attention interoceptively, to pay attention inwardly. And so really the breath is almost a means to an end, right? I'm not trying to change the way people are breathing necessarily. I'm trying to change where they place their mind. But in changing where they place their mind, I may be also changing how they're breathing.
Yeah.
So those are the two ways that I kind of come at it in both of those modalities. With kettlebells, the breath is also plays a role. The movements are faster in many cases because they're ballistic. The breath can actually facilitate explosive strength when used more explosively in some cases in the swings. So, but all of this is, in my opinion, because people will breathe and because people need to keep breathing. Sometimes the best cue in the beginning is just breathe, keep breathing. and not creating all of this. Like, I think that a lot of, especially former yoga students, come in with a lot of questions before they've learned anything about a modality like kettlebells or strength, about how they should be breathing right off the bat. And on one hand, it's probably because they're very attuned to their breath, but the way they're going to be breathing in these modalities is going to be completely different from the modality that they're familiar with. And it's probably a question that they're not going to benefit from exploring. In my opinion, it's more beneficial to really explore these broader brushstrokes of how to hold on to the weight, how to pick it up, how to set it down, what are the actions of the hips, knees, shoulders, the relationship of your body to gravity. Let's start there. And then we'll fill in color inside the lines with stuff around breath. And I also have a fair amount of people tell me, that they feel like they're bearing down, that they're holding their breath, and this is negatively impacting, say, pelvic floor function. Maybe they feel like it's causing them pelvic pain. It's causing, excess tension. And so that's when I start to get a little bit more into like the nuances of breath mechanics, and I refer them, potentially to PTs, depending on what they're describing, or to other modalities that actually are more geared toward understanding the relationship between breathing in the pelvic floor, right? Which I think is worth exploring in these circumstances specifically.
Yeah.
This episode is brought to you by Movement Logic, a library of evidence-based movement therapy tutorials to help your students who are in pain and looking to you for help. What most movement teachers need are critical thinking skills to be able to respond to their students' needs in the moment. But let's face it, whether it's a private client or a student after class, questions about what to do about pain and discomfort can be challenging to address for a movement teacher. However, it's possible to be able to address students' needs skillfully using evidence-based reasoning and tools, all while staying within scope of practice. This happens by becoming anatomically and biomechanically informed, gaining a deeper understanding around pain science, and acquiring a diverse set of teaching tools that you can apply immediately. With Movement Logic, you will do just that, all while building a foundation of critical thinking skills to reach a broader clientele. Want a free peek of what you'll learn in our tutorials? Right now on our website homepage at www.movementlogictutorials.com, you can sign up for our email list to receive updates on course sales and discounts. When you do, you'll also receive 4 free pelvic floor videos that take a movement-based approach to working with clients with an array of pelvic floor concerns. Within these videos, we help you understand specifically how the movement or breathing exercise can influence awareness of and connection to the pelvic floor specifically, as well as many other structures it directly influences. Go to movementlogictutorials.com, enter your first name and email address, and get 4 free pelvic floor videos. And now, back to our episode.
I was going to say that is another patient population that if they're coming in and pelvic floor or low back or just any sort of like hip pain, some of it is in terms of what I choose to look at first. If someone comes in with hip pain and I spend the hour looking at their breathing, even if I know it's especially relevant, that might not be a situation where they feel like, well, what did she do to it? She didn't even touch my hip, right? So,
right.
But certainly as part of treatment, looking at the mechanics of the diaphragm and the pelvic floor and trying to help the person understand that relationship and potentially even feel that, in the movement of their breathing is huge and is always something that I look into with people.
I want to talk a little bit about something you're bringing up here, which I think is incredibly relevant to people who teach movement, especially people who teach movement for the purpose of helping solve problems, right? Which is that you have to really get tapped into what your student or patient, in your case, expects. You want to know, you want to have your finger on the pulse of what they expect you to do and where they expect you to focus your attention. Because if you start to deviate really extremely from those expectations, this creates, I think, a lot of confusion and oftentimes frustration. And so if someone comes in with hip pain, but you get the sense that it's related to their breathing and related to their pelvic floor, you don't immediately go off of the hip narrative and start, just exclusively focusing on breathing and pelvic floor, but actually you tend to their hip, right? Is that kind of what you're saying? Is like you don't want to create this feeling of like you're not listening to me and hearing what I'm saying. It's my hip therapist that hurts, not my breathing. What does this have to do with what we're doing?
Yeah.
I find that this has been such a huge learning curve for me as a teacher too. Because say, for example, if I call the class Vinyasa Flow, and then people come into my class and I'm not letting them flow, they're going to be upset.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And so, it just reminds me again of these connections between sort of our worlds.
Yeah. And some of it, so as far as like, at what point do I bring in something, whether it's breathing or not, that seems unrelated. Some of it depends on the patient that I'm seeing and their sort of innate understanding of how the body works. Sometimes I'll have people come in and they'll say, my neck hurts. And as we dive into it, it's one of the things that we discover is, let's say they take a walk. After the long walk, their neck hurts. Mm-hmm. I am, depending on the evidence that I have, I am more or less able to say something like, it's coming from your ankle, and have them believe me, right? Or it's something, you're holding your breath while you're walking, or something like that, right? So a lot of it depends on the person in front of me, but, and this is, I think it is sort of this thing where, we talk about general concepts, but all of these generalities ultimately have to become part of your skill set of looking at, really seeing the person in front of you
and listening.
Yeah. And seeing what they, I mean, I'm using, observe, feeling the person in front of you, using whatever sense, tasting the person in front. No, I'm just kidding. Licking the person in front of you. Engaging your treatment based on that. That would be crazy. But actually, I'm in Los Angeles. I bet I could make a fortune. Anyway.
Do you follow Adam Meekins, the sports physio, on Instagram? No. He's been posting all of these like insane, wacky, quote unquote, therapeutic treatments that people are actually making money doing. And you are not far off.
Listen, I could start an OnlyFans account about therapeutic licking, I'm sure.
Yeah.
I would make a lot of money. But anyway, understanding the person in front of you, and I think part of that. But so let me make my bigger point. Understanding the person in front of you, understanding that if they came in and they said something like, "My neck hurts," and massage makes it feel better. They've basically told me half of what I'm going to do in that session, which is I'm going to touch their neck.
Right, because that's what that's
their expectation.
Yes.
That they already have told me it's going to make them feel better, and my job is to make them feel better, in larger and smaller concepts.
And they are not wrong.
They're not wrong. So I let them tell me that.
Yeah.
And then maybe, because part of what you're doing when you're meeting someone for the first time and they are coming to you and they're saying, I have pain in my body. And this is true for movement teachers because they get that as well, right?
It's absolutely true for movement teachers.
Whatever your scope is, I have pain in my body and I'm looking to you to help me. The first thing that I have to do is make myself trustworthy and make myself seem like someone that can help them. So if they've given me this huge clue that says, if you rub my neck, it's going to feel better.
Right.
Whether they know it or not, that's what they've done.
Yeah.
I would, it would be silly of me to be like, well, what I'm going to have you do is a bunch of like just long held static stretches.
Right.
I mean, maybe that's something that is appropriate for them down the line, but I'm talking about this sort of initial moment. And then I can pull in, hey, let's look at your breathing, because, and then I've established myself as a trusted person who knows what you're doing and knows what they're talking about. So they're willing to consider something like breathing, which they maybe didn't have that kind of automatic understanding that it would be related, or, that it could have anything to do with how their neck or their ankle or their knee feels. Yeah. But part of it is establishing yourself as a trustworthy person, as something of an expert, as someone who has helped them, right? Before you start to maybe pull in something that feels perhaps more esoteric or not quite as related. And then that way, when it turns out to be related and not esoteric, but actually very tangible, that's just more evidence of you being this trustworthy person.
Yeah, and we were talking in the episode about how often you should exercise, about increasing compliance, like increasing the likelihood that someone will continue exercising after engaging in some type of exercise program. And one of the things that we mentioned was important was these motivations that are kind of instant gratification or just like known wins that this person, understands they like and want. And one of those things for me in strength training is in the needs analysis in the beginning of working with someone, is to really get an understanding of what they like to do. If they've never done strength training before, I'm listening for what they did do. So if they did a lot of Pilates, I'm going to guess that they really like to strengthen their core. Right? If they did a lot of yoga, I'm feeling like maybe they're going to find a lot of benefit and relevance if I start talking about hamstring strength, or if I start talking about like shoulder strength for things like chaturanga and push-up, like carry over between chaturanga and push-up or handstand. So I'm looking at what is it that they are already interested in based on what they're sharing with me, and then actually devoting a large portion of their training to continuing to work on those things that they like, probably because they're already good at, right? So that I can then give them things that they're not good at, which they might not like right off the bat, but because I've given them enough of the things to do that they understand the meaning that is meaningful, they understand why it's meaningful, and it's because it's already meaningful to them, then I create this space, this opportunity to give them something else. One of my longtime teachers from yoga would always say, give them what they want so you can give them what they need.
Yes. Kind
of a thing. And I think that is just so true for all human relationships, actually. And a lot of the time, I think what people want is they want to be heard. Yes. They want to be understood. And we cannot hear or understand our students or our patients unless we listen. So this is all kind of, our tangent away from this idea of breathing. But what I will say, and I think that's what's coming up for me in this conversation, is that there are some students or patients that know that they want to focus on breathing. And they may or may not need to. Right? It's like my beginners who come in and are like, tell me how to breathe. I'm like, well, first let's learn how to hinge, right?
Right.
And then there are the students who come in and they have no idea that some of their problems might be resolved by working on breathing, but they have this other idea of what they need to be doing, right? And you need to give them that. What is breathing? I want to talk about breathing from a little bit more of a, like, let's go back. Let's go way, way back. Like, what is breathing actually? Because then maybe we can understand sort of what systems we are actually manipulating when we change the way someone is breathing. So what is breathing? Breathing is, from my understanding, the exchange of gas in the alveoli, and I don't even know if I'm pronouncing that word correctly, which are the sacs, the air sacs of the lungs, which are the final generation of, you've got your trachea, your bronchioles that branch off, and your beautiful, tree branch of lungs, right and left side, to these little air sacs that maybe you could think of like tiny little grapes full of air. And the membrane is so thin, and there's this really almost immediate exchange of gases, of O2, oxygen, with CO2, right, from the body that comes out as the exhale, and then the O2 coming in as the inhale. So that why are we breathing? Like, this exchange of gas is what's happening when we breathe. That's why, but like, what does that gas do? Why do we need oxygen?
Well, some of, it's oxygen powers
all of our cells.
Yes.
All of our cells.
But the other thing to think about is the relative pH level of your blood. And the impulse to breathe in, my understanding, is actually generated by receptors that are sort of, for want of a better word, tasting how acidic your blood is.
Yep. And what creates blood acidity?
Carbon dioxide.
Right.
So if you have too much carbon dioxide in your system, your little receptors are tasting it and saying, we need to get this out of here.
Yeah.
But you can't exhale if you haven't inhaled. So fortunately, the inhale is also useful. But part of it is then decreasing the acidity of your blood, because system-wide general alkalinity, for want of a better term, is optimal.
Right. Okay. So alkalinity is a reduction in acidity. Just so we know. Yeah. So the breath centers in the brain govern breathing.
Yeah.
Right. So this is all coming from the brain as well. And there are receptors in your body that give your brain that information to output the signal to breathe. And it's automatic, right?
Yeah. And
it's also but it's also something we can control, right? So it's part of the side of our nervous system that is automatic, but it's also side of the nervous system that is within our control to change to a point, right?
To a point. And you know, one of my favorite things about breathing is, did you, I don't know if this was just my misspent youth or if this was something a lot of people did when they were, I don't know, somewhere between like 8 and 12, where I don't think I ever actually did it myself. I think I was too chicken, but we would sort of dare each other to hold your breath until you passed out.
I did it all the time.
Yeah. Okay, good.
I mean, there's so many years of my childhood spent holding my breath for as long as possible.
Yeah,
I can't even
but that speaks to the automaticity of your body, in that your body will be like, hey, dummy, I'm going to make you literally pass out because you are refusing to breathe, and we're not going to stay alive if you don't breathe. So
I never was able to hold out until pass out.
Well, yeah, but if, we're going to wrest control away from you. Like, let's say because it becomes extremely uncomfortable, right? So if you are overriding that discomfort to the level where it's actually becoming problematic, your body will be like, you know what? Go away for a minute, and it will knock you out so that it can continue to breathe on its own, right? That's the hierarchy of systems in your body, that just being like, nope. Yeah. Brain, heart, lungs.
Those are some of like the ways in which our brain controls the physiological process of breathing, so the neurophysiological aspect of breathing. We've discussed a little bit about the biomechanics, the anatomy, like the parts of our body that are directly involved in breathing, the biomechanics of that. So, air comes in through the path, the holes in our face. It travels down a tube, right, into the lungs, and then gas molecules are exchanged at the alveoli. And those molecules that are exchanged, CO2, exhaled, and then O2 then enters into the heart, right? So then the heart takes that oxygenated blood, and via the arterial system of our body, we end up having circulation. Circulation is governed by the heart and also the venous system, but the heart is what sends the oxygenated blood out. So why would, for example, we need to breathe more? Why would we need to breathe faster? Why would we need to breathe deeper? Well, because our body is demanding, for some reason, more oxygen to tissues. In the case of exercise, these are usually the muscles, okay, the working tissues. So this is where we start to look at how exercise affects respiratory rate and something called tidal volume, which is the amount of air that enters into the lungs and is exchanged on inhale and exhale. And so when I've been, kind of learning about strength training, learning about cardiovascular endurance training through studying for the CSCS, I'm coming to understand that like breathing in the mind of from the strength and conditioning lens plays a very different role in people's minds than it does, say, through the lens of yoga. So through the lens of yoga, I think we become really wrapped up in the biomechanics and anatomy of breathing. but don't really consider what the metabolic demands are for breathing, because the metabolic demands in yoga are typically very low.
Yeah.
Compared to strength and cardiovascular endurance training.
Yeah.
So especially cardiovascular endurance training. Okay, that's where it really starts to, that's where we get, the elites versus the novices, is their ability to oxygenate their tissues, the working tissues of their body. So when we think about changing the way someone is breathing in yoga, we may be kind of, okay, we want to change the way someone's breathing in yoga, right? But we're working with a tool, asana, potentially, or pranayama, that is incapable of sufficiently metabolically stressing the body in order to create this cardiovascular change or this respiratory change. And this is something I've been thinking about, because what are we actually trying to change then when we change someone's breathing in yoga? Are we actually trying to strengthen the breathing systems of the body? Or are we potentially, and I say this as a question, are we potentially teaching people how to perform biomechanically a way of breathing that is yogic?
Well, it's a good question. I think it depends on, certainly during asana, to me, it is there's not a metabolic demand. So something about it has to do with other things that you're trying to teach the person. For example, coordination of breath with movement as a means of mental focus.
Mental focus. I keep coming back to that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But certainly with pranayama practices, there are so many, and they have just such a wide variety of effects on the body. To me, again, typically pranayama practice is practiced either seated or, in a particular position that's not changing a lot of the time if you're just focusing on pranayama. So it is not a, strength and conditioning, oxygen, respiratory rate consideration, and it is a nervous system consideration. And what are we trying to do to the nervous system? Are we trying to rev it up, or are we trying to calm it down? There's practices, I think it's called Brahmari, where you kind of buzz through your nose. That's actually really more about my experience of it is it helps to clear out your sinuses, because you're literally just vibrating your sinuses, which is kind of great if you have allergies or things like that. So some of the origins of some of those practices are not cardiovascular. They are more, they have other goals, or they're working on other systems, or something like breath of fire.
Bastrika.
Yeah, has a nervous system elevation, a sympathetic upregulation quality, which may be what you're trying to induce. And there are other breathing practices like where you're counting to the inhale, and you're things like that are more down regulating, and that's what you're trying to induce. So,
and it all depends on the person, right? That whether or not any of these are actually calming or down regulating.
Right.
It depends not just on the person practicing them, but who else is in the room and what's going on. Because
and the person asking you to do the thing.
Right? I had some of the most painful and anxiety-producing experiences in a pranayama program. And with a teacher who was very particular about how I needed to sit and how long I needed to hold my breath and how long I needed to inhale and exhale. And it was very formulaic. It was very prescribed. And I was in pain. I couldn't sit in these ways for as long as she wanted me to. And I wasn't able, I felt just very I couldn't relax enough to take a full breath, even though that was what was the ideal and what I was being asked to do. And I hate that feeling as a student of not being able to get it, because it's just not working. And I found that to be unfortunately one of my first experiences with pranayama. And then When I took the yoga tune-up training with Jill Miller, she was like, lie down, we're going to do pranayama. I was like, oh, thank God. Like, you mean I can lie down and do pranayama? And I was able to be relaxed. So that kind of goes back to what we were talking about before, which is the difference between teaching someone the biomechanics of breathing, whether that be the seat or the way that their ribs should move relative to their belly, or the the amount of time that they should take to inhale and exhale, versus creating an environment that individual feels is safe, where their body can relax and where they can have the cognitive space to actually focus on breathing.
Yeah. I mean, I think across the board, we can all agree that the worst way to get somebody who is not relaxed to relax is to tell them to relax. Nothing makes me personally more instantly just at a 10 on the anger scale if someone tells me to relax, especially if it has relax and then lady afterwards. Those two words together, pretty much, if you want me to punch you in the face, just come up to me and say, relax, lady. Or, calm down, or any of those things, any of those instructions where what you're saying actually, yes, would be ideal maybe for the person in that moment, but the delivery system and the language has a completely opposite effect. It's like when people say, don't panic, you're like, what? Why? Ah!
Yeah.
So, yeah, sometimes being told to relax is extremely unrelaxing.
Yeah.
In my experience.
I do think that the effects of conscious relaxation can carry over into our lives long term, just like the physiological adaptations of strength training can carry over into our being able to more comfortably engage in activities of daily living and meaningful life activities, right? But I wonder if we can facilitate conscious relaxation with a little bit less pickiness around how someone is breathing. So, for example, here's a question for you, Sarah, and I wanted to get into this in specific detail. Like, what's your take on, if both as a student of yoga, as a former teacher of yoga, as a PT, like, what's your take on this idea that you should be breathing in through your nose rather than your mouth, or that you should be, let's start with that one, actually, before I give you too much to think about. Like, nose breathing versus mouth breathing. I find it very, very difficult sometimes to breathe in and out through my nose. And the idea that I should be is just very, like, I'm a little bit like, why? Well, there are physiological reasons why breathing through your nose is beneficial that have to do with the pathway of air through your nostrils, the fact that the air gets warmed and cleaned a little bit by your nose hairs before it goes into your lungs, versus through the mouth, which bypasses that. Sometimes you want to bypass that because the oxygen need is really high. Like when I'm doing a hard hike and I get to the top of the hill, I'm not standing there going, I'm going, right? Because what my body needs the most in that moment is not the warmest, cleanest air. It's just the most air possible, right? So depending on the demand level, if you are forcing an override where you are breathing through your nose, that may actually cause more anxiety or make you more uncomfortable because it's just not delivering enough oxygen to your system. And sometimes that's the practice. Like sometimes the practice is like, let's get comfortable with discomfort. But I often feel like that piece of it is missing in the instruction a little bit.
Well, and I might be misstating this because I am not a Pilates instructor, but I've just spent a lot of time around Pilates people. I believe in the Pilates practice, the cueing is inhaling through the nose, exhaling through the mouth. So, first of all, A, I might be totally wrong, and B, I don't know why. So I'm sure there is a reason, but I do not know what it is. But it is specific to yoga that we emphasize both the inhale and the exhale through the nose. But I think that is also a function of not having this metabolic demand.
Yes.
That breathing through the nose makes you generally, you're breathing at a slower rate. And so it's having that nervous system impact more than anything else, I think is the goal of that in the asana practice.
Yeah. And everyone has a different baseline heart rate, cardiac output. Everyone has a different baseline respiratory rate to reflect that. And so it's also just, I think, really, I think you're on shaky ground when you start making claims like it's better to breathe through the nose. Because it just depends on what you're doing, who's doing it, and their physiological baselines, whether or not they're safe, things like that.
If I have a cold, it is not better for me to try to breathe through my nose.
in the neck tutorial, Sarah, you do teach the movement logic neck tutorial. You do teach a strategy for taping the mouth.
Yes.
Can you, because that obviously would cause someone during sleep, right? So it would cause someone to breathe through their nose. So can you talk a little bit about why someone would want to tape their mouth shut?
Yeah.
Other than that, they have verbal diarrhea.
That's a situation where you may want to tape somebody else's mouth shut. But yeah, so this practice of taping your mouth shut while you sleep, it definitely sounds insane, but it's not. There is also, and I know it only sort of generally, and so I'm going to botch this as well, but there is a benefit to breathing through your nose in terms of nitric oxide. That's laughing gas. There's something about the nitrogen. There's something nitrogen related, and that's why I should not be saying this with any sort of authority, but there is something that happens.
You're not saying it with authority. You're like, I don't know what I'm saying.
I don't know what I'm saying. But there is something when you breathe through your nose that you get more of that, and that is advantageous for some reason. And what I should really do is look that up, and I will, and then we can put it in the show notes what the reason is.
Sounds good.
I'm not randomly talking about something and people are like, whatever. So the taping your mouth shut forces you obviously to breathe through your nose when you're sleeping. But the other, so if you are a sleepy time mouth breather, which I can be sometimes, part of it is that the advantage of breathing through the nose. Part of it is also getting you to stop doing things like clenching or grinding your teeth.
Okay.
Or getting the muscles of the jaw to actually relax because they're not like overworking to try to hold your mouth closed.
Interesting.
Which they don't actually do. They do the opposite. But so it has a lot to do also with like teeth clenching, waking up. I used to wake up because I was a clencher, and I also use a mouth guard. So there's there's a variety of things that you can do. But I would wake up with headaches because I had been like clenching my jaw so hard while I was asleep. And so it's an interesting sort of phenomenon that if you tape your mouth closed, it actually lets like the masseter and those big old like side jaw muscles to relax, and then you can sleep better a lot of the time.
Yeah, this was for the section on headaches and jaw pain.
Yeah.
And is there a particular type of tape that people would want to get for that? Not Scotch tape.
Not Scotch tape.
Duct tape.
Yes, duct tape. You want to find. No. Oh my God. It just hurts thinking about it. No, there's something called medical tape, which is tape that you use typically to like apply a bandage. You want to use like the lightest medical tape that you can find. And the other trick that I learned from doing it wrong is I definitely recommend putting some sort of like chapstick or something on your lips, but before you tape, so the tape is sticking to your skin, not to your lips, because when you take it off, you do not want to remove a layer of your lip skin.
No,
it doesn't feel great. So that's my trick.
Like you've learned that through experience.
Yes, I learned that the hard way. But yeah, it's if you say you're sharing your bed with someone for the first time, that may not pull it out that night.
New puppy.
Yeah, new puppy, new human, whatever it may be. You may want to wait on the taping until night 2, let's say.
Okay.
I'm turning over and being like, "Good night," with like your mouth taped shut, and they're like looming at them with some tape. I'm gonna tape your mouth shut now. You may want to wait on that.
Oh man, okay, yeah, I didn't think of it like in that way. Jeez, you're really good at turning the volume up on various ways we can take
situations
something.
that could or couldn't happen. Yeah.
And then my second question is chest or belly breathing, Sarah. What's your take? What should we be breathing through our belly? What does that even mean? And what the heck?
I honestly, to me, it's just it's the false 2 options narrative.
Yeah, false binary.
Yeah. And thank you for coming up with a word for 2 options.
Or dichotomy, if you prefer.
Yeah. Where actually the answer is a third one, which is just diaphragm. Just find help somebody find their diaphragm if they don't know where it is.
Whoa. Okay. Diaphragm.
Diaphragm. Just so I don't tell people to chest breathe. I don't tell them to belly breathe. I help them find their diaphragm. I have them feel how the movement of the diaphragm impacts their chest and their belly.
Exactly.
And then I leave
Right.
them to it.
So the downward descent of the diaphragm is the active contraction, which
Yes.
both creates movement in the abdominal cavity and elevation of the rib cage.
Yes.
Okay. Cool. And then I would add to that, if you are stressing your respiratory system, you're going to want to be breathing all the way up in your clavicles eventually, you know?
Absolutely.
You're going to need every available square centimeter of space to get oxygen into your lungs to be exchanged and then sent out to the working tissues.
And people do that naturally without
Yeah.
realizing that's what they're doing. Like if you are there, come to the end of a sprint and you are breathing hard and you put your arms up and your
Yep.
hands on the top of your head,
Yeah.
that elevation, as I hit my mic, that elevation of your arms lifts your collarbones and
Yeah.
allows you to get more air in. Or when
I find-
people put their
I
hands
dou-
on their knees and they
Yeah,
bend
I
over,
double
same thing.
over and I shrug my shoulders up.
Yeah, yeah. You're achieving the same thing either way.
Yeah.
And people, and again, and that's why, like, you know, how much intervention is actually useful. There are these natural behaviors that we do, movements that we do without even recognizing the why behind it. You know, somebody hunching over is not like, well, I need to elevate my clavicles so I can get an additional, you know, they're just doing it because it feels better because they can get more breath in that way.
Yep, exactly. There's no, I would go as far to say, like, there's no wrong way to breathe
Yes.
because however someone is breathing has worked. They're alive.
They're still alive.
It's working.
They're breathing. They're
But-
not breathing.
There may be more advantageous ways to breathe depending on the context, and making the change is my big question that I'm still, you know, sitting with here is like, how do we make that change? And I find my recommendation would be try to stress your cardiovascular system at appropriate amounts regularly.
And what that stress would look like is entirely dependent on that person. For some people,
At
stressing
appropriate amounts for the individual.
Exactly. You know,
At
are you
appropriate
a
amounts for the
rehab
individual.
level, or
And
are you at an athletic level?
There's so many different ways to stress the cardiovascular system. That does not just mean go for a run, like not at all.
Right.
And you know, it comes back to this rate of perceived exertion and how hard you think you're working. And if you're on a walk and you feel like you're working pretty hard, why don't you try to sustain that for a little bit, you know, and don't go crazy and do 1,000 shoulder shrugs. Was that from the last episode we recorded? I'm getting all twisted and confused, but like you gave the example of this guy who was given like 10 shoulder shrugs from the PT, and he was like, well, if 10 is good, 100 must be better.
Yeah.
So in general, like, and this goes for, you know, stressing your body, I think across the board, like a 5 to 10% increase over the course of a week is more than enough. Like, you should not be increasing stress by more than 5 to 10%. And as soon as you start doing that, you might find that you're, you know, having some additional aches and pains and wear and tear associated with that overload. So cool. All right. Well, I have to say, I really felt like my Alabama accent is coming right along there in the first couple words of that sentence. Whale.
Whale. Mine is just a very, very rude.
I've got this like Midwestern New Yorker Alabama thing going on. Eliana's starting to sound like an Alabamian, though.
Amazing.
It's kind of funny. Oh, it's
love it.
hilarious. She can have a Southern accent if we stay here long enough.
Yeah, right.
I think that's it. I think that's all for today. I feel like this has been, you know, as always, a very enlightening conversation. A note to you listeners that you can check out our show notes for links to the references that we have mentioned in this podcast, including something about nitric oxide.
Yes, I'm going to make a note to myself right now. Look up and say something smart.
How to administer laughing gas organically within your own body while sleeping. You could also... Just kidding. You can also visit the movement. Speaking of like new bed guests while self-administering organic nitric oxide while sleeping, that would be fun. Okay. You can also visit the movement.
I was like, where is this going?
Yeah. So you can also visit the Movement Logic website where you can get on our mailing list and be in the know about nerdy stuff and sales on our upcoming tutorials. You can also watch the video version of this episode where Sarah, her contrasting colors right now of her pink shirt and her blue wall are beautiful. Spectacular. Vibrant. Okay. And if you want to see what our faces look like especially while we're listening and thinking, like I have a lot of wrinkles around my brow. Sometimes I look angry. Thanks so much for joining us on the Movement Logic podcast. Sarah's smiling right now. It's terrible when we do the silent laughs because what true. Someone has said is like so funny. We're laughing silently, but to listeners, it sounds like we're a really tough crowd. Like
we're
crickets.
Just like, that was not funny.
Crickets. But if you watch the video, you'll see that we think that each other is very funny sometimes, even though you can't hear it. Okay. Thanks so much for joining us on the Movement Logic podcast. Finally, it helps us out a lot if you would please like and subscribe. Please like us. If you would please subscribe if you like the episode. Please like us. I mean, truly, that is really all I want. Please subscribe and rate and review because that helps us become more visible, I guess. Join us next week for more Movement Logic, more of our strong opinions loosely held or our loosely held morals and strong muscles. Did I get it? Was that right? Is that the subline, the subtext, the tagline?
Strong opinions loosely held, yes.
Okay, got it. Committing it to memory on episode morals, 10.
Strong muscles, I think, is the other version.
And the truer one.
Yes.
Okay. Bye.
Thank you so much for listening. If you enjoyed today's episode and you want to support us, please subscribe, rate, and review on Apple, Spotify, Stitcher, or wherever you listen to podcasts. If you like to watch, head on over to our website at movementlogictutorials.com/podcast, where you can watch the video version. We'll be back in your ears next week to nerd out about movement without taking ourselves too seriously in the process.